My name is Karen, and if there is one day I will never forget, it's the day we buried my father-in-law in Boston, Massachusetts. Funerals are supposed to carry a certain sanctity, a quiet sadness that humbles even the coldest heart. But as I stood under the gray New England sky, the rain drizzling onto my black dress, I noticed my husband, Daniel, standing tall beside me, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed not on the coffin but on the horizon. I knew that look, calculating, distant, hungry. He wasn't mourning, he was waiting. The crowd had gathered in solemn silence. Family, friends, old colleagues of my father-in-law, a man who had built an empire of shipping and steel across America. He wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful, the kind of man who commanded rooms without raising his voice. I had admired him deeply, though he never gave affection freely. Still, I respected him. Daniel, on the other hand, had always been a disappointment to him. A jobless husband, a man with endless excuses, no ambition, no discipline. I carried us for years, 2 jobs, long hours, saving every penny, while Daniel stayed home, dreaming up schemes that never materialized. When the priest finished his prayers and the coffin was lowered into the earth, I felt a weight settle in my chest. It was the end of an era. Yet in that same moment, I felt something darker begin. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flicker of triumph in Daniel's face. It was subtle, but it was there, a smirk quickly disguised by a fake sniffle and a dab at his dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. Later that evening, after the mourners dispersed and the family gathered in the sprawling Beacon Hill townhouse my father-in-law had once called home, the reading of the will commenced. I sat in the richly decorated parlor, surrounded by mahogany shelves filled with leather-bound books, the air thick with expectation. The lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, a sharp man with a perpetual frown, unfolded the will slowly, his voice echoing against the high ceilings. To my son, Daniel, I leave the sum of $550 million. Gasps rippled through the room, but my heart stopped cold. Daniel's eyes lit up with a greed I had never seen before. My palms began to sweat. I looked down at my lap, forcing myself to breathe as the lawyer continued with the other allocations, properties, stocks, trust funds for charities, but all I could hear was that number, $550 million. By the time we returned to our Chicago home, night had fallen, and the city lights glowed against Lake Michigan. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this inheritance would change things for the better. Perhaps Daniel would find purpose now, a chance to build something meaningful. Perhaps he would finally appreciate the years I had given him. But I should have known better. He didn't wait long. He poured himself a glass of scotch, sank into the leather sofa, and looked at me as though I were a stranger. His lips curled into something cruel. "You're useless to me now," he said flatly, his voice carrying a finality that hit me like a slap. "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like poison. I stared at him, stunned, my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. Useless? After everything I had sacrificed, after working myself to exhaustion while he wallowed in laziness, after defending him when even his own father called him worthless, he dared to look me in the eye and dismiss me as though I were an old coat he no longer needed. Something inside me snapped, but I didn't let it show. No, not yet. I straightened my spine, swallowed the lump in my throat, and forced a bitter smile. My voice came out calm, mocking even, though my blood boiled with rage. "Don't regret this later. LOL," I whispered, the laugh hollow, but sharp enough to cut. His eyes narrowed. He didn't expect me to take it so lightly. He wanted me broken, shattered, begging. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. I tucked away the fury, buried it deep in my chest, where it grew like fire. That night, while he drank himself into a stupor, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind churned with thoughts of betrayal, of vengeance, of reclaiming the power he thought he had stolen from me. I remembered the way my father-in-law once pulled me aside, months before his death. His voice was low, but firm, his eyes piercing through me. "Karen, you're stronger than he'll ever be. Daniel has no discipline, no loyalty. Watch him. Be ready. At the time, I thought it was just a bitter father speaking of his son's failures. But now, his words echoed like prophecy. He had seen this betrayal long before I did. And though Daniel thought he had finally won, I felt the tide shifting. I didn't know how yet, but I would make him regret every word he said to me. In the days that followed, Daniel grew bolder, flaunting his plans for a new life without me. He spoke of penthouses in New York, yachts docked in Miami, vacations in London. He bragged about private jets, expensive suits, women who would actually know how to appreciate him. Each word was a dagger, but I swallowed the pain, disguising it with silence and a smile that made him uneasy. Because deep down, I knew something he didn't. Men like Daniel always overplay their hand. Arrogance blinds them. He thought money was everything, that dollars could erase his years of weakness. But power, true power, was something else entirely. It wasn't in the bank account. It was in control, in patience, in knowing when to strike. As I walked the streets of Chicago one evening, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, I looked up at the skyscrapers towering above me. America was built on ambition, on survival of the ruthless. I had been silent for too long, loyal for too long. That night, I swore to myself that I would not be the discarded wife left in the shadows. I would take the inheritance he thought was his salvation and turn it into his destruction. I would make him choke on every dollar, bleed from every arrogant word. He thought I was useless? He had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. And so, under the glittering lights of the city, I made my vow. This was not the end of my story. This was the beginning of his downfall. The divorce came quickly, almost too quickly. Daniel, blinded by greed, pushed it through with ruthless efficiency. He strutted into the courthouse like a man who had already won the game of life, convinced that a clean break from me would be his gateway to freedom and wealth. Papers were signed, rings were removed, and just like that, I was legally discarded. But beneath his arrogance, I saw it clearly. His eagerness wasn't about ending a marriage. It was about sprinting toward a fortune. He thought the inheritance was already his kingdom, waiting for him to rule unchecked. He had no idea the trap his father had laid. A week later, we were summoned to the office of Carter and Wells law firm in Boston, the same firm that had managed the estate for decades. Their building was a monument to power, polished marble floors, walls lined with oil paintings of America's most ruthless businessmen, and chandeliers that sparkled like frozen fire. This was no ordinary office. It was a battlefield where legacies were decided. I entered quietly, dressed in a black suit that mirrored my calm resolve. Daniel, on the other hand, swaggered through the doors as though he owned the place already. His new Italian suit, his diamond watch, his smug smile, it all screamed of premature victory. He didn't glance at me once. To him, I was already erased, irrelevant. At the long oak table sat Jonathan Pierce, the family lawyer. He was a sharp man with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for precision. He greeted us both with a measured nod, his thin lips curving ever so slightly upward, as though he knew a secret that neither of us yet grasped. "Shall we begin?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. His tone was formal, but I could hear something underneath, amusement. Daniel leaned forward, impatient. "Let's just get this over with. I don't need the ceremony. Just tell me where the money is." Mr. Pierce opened a thick leather-bound folder. His eyes scanned the pages before he spoke. As per the will of the late Mr. Harrison Whitmore, the estate of $550 million was left to his son, Daniel Whitmore. Daniel smirked, leaning back in his chair. As expected, under the condition that the assets, holdings, and funds shall be overseen, managed, and controlled by Mrs. Karen Whitmore for the period of 10 years. The words dropped like a hammer in the silence of the room. Daniel blinked, as though he hadn't heard correctly. What the hell did you just say?" Pierce didn't flinch. He repeated the clause slowly, savoring each word. "The estate is yours in name, Daniel, but Karen has full legal authority over its management. She alone controls the accounts, disbursements, and business decisions for a decade. You will receive funds at her discretion." For a moment, Daniel's face went blank. Then the rage began to boil. His cheeks flushed crimson, his eyes bulged, and his voice rose to a roar that echoed in the hall. "This is a joke. A damn joke. You think I'm going to let that woman, my ex-wife, control me?" Pierce's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. And then he laughed. A sharp, cutting laugh that filled the room. Not polite, not restrained, but mocking. It was the laugh of a man who had seen too many arrogant fools fall on their faces. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "You're fired. Do you hear me? You're fired." The lawyer only laughed harder, his shoulders shaking, the sound rich with contempt. Finally, he leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Daniel, have you even read the will carefully?" I couldn't help it. I leaned back, crossing my arms, a satisfied smirk tugging at my lips. I wanted to savor this moment, to drink in every second of his humiliation. Pierce slid the folder across the table. "Your father wasn't blind. He saw what you were. He knew what you would do. And so, he chose the one person you could never escape from. Karen holds the keys now. Without her approval, you have nothing." Daniel's hands trembled as he snatched the folder and scanned the pages, his lips moving frantically as he read the clauses, the signatures, the notarized seals. His breath came in short gasps, and I saw it. The moment reality struck him like a blade to the chest. His empire wasn't his. His freedom wasn't freedom at all. He had shackled himself to me the moment he demanded that divorce. "You," his voice cracked, his finger pointing at me like a weapon. "You did this. You manipulated him. You poisoned him against me." I tilted my head, my voice calm, but edged with venom. "No, Daniel. You did this to yourself. Your father knew exactly who you were. And so did I." The rage in his eyes turned feral. He lunged to his feet, his chair scraping violently across the floor. "I'll fight this. I'll sue you, sue this firm, sue everyone." Pierce's laughter died into a cruel smile. "Try it. The will is airtight. Every dollar you thought you had belongs to Karen's judgment. Without her signature, you couldn't buy a sandwich." The color drained from Daniel's face. For the first time, I saw fear there, not arrogance, not smugness, but raw, trembling fear. He had lost. I leaned forward, my voice soft but laced with aggression. "You called me useless, remember? You threw me aside the moment you thought you were rich. Now look at you, helpless, begging, stripped of every ounce of power. And the best part? You'll have to come to me. For everything." Daniel's lips quivered, his fists clenched, but he had no words. He was trapped. I stood slowly, letting the silence choke him. "Consider this, Daniel. You wanted freedom. But now your prison is me. And I'll enjoy watching you rot inside it." With that, I turned and walked out of the office, my heels striking the marble floor like the beat of a war drum. Every step was vengeance. Every step was power reclaimed. As the heavy doors closed behind me, I heard Daniel's voice break into a strangled scream. But it didn't matter. His voice had no power anymore. The empire he thought was his belonged to me, and so did his downfall. I didn't just win that day. I conquered. The day I walked out of Carter and Wells, I felt like a new woman. No, more than that. I felt reborn. For years, I had been the quiet wife, the one who picked up Daniel's broken pieces, the one who worked late nights just to make sure the mortgage was paid while he played video games and smoked cigars he couldn't afford. He had thought I was weak, that I was merely an accessory in his pathetic life. But the moment I stepped into the Boston air, with the will's truth echoing in my ears, I knew everything had changed. The money was his in name, but the power was mine. And in America, power is the only currency that matters. Within 2 weeks, I made my first move. I purchased a sprawling $40 million oceanfront mansion in Miami, Florida, something Daniel had always fantasized about but never had the discipline to earn. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress. The estate stretched along the glittering water, with walls of glass that looked out over the Atlantic, infinity pools that shimmered under the sun, and gates taller than any man could climb. My name was on every deed, every contract. Not his. When I signed the final check, I could almost hear his voice in my head, mocking, demanding, belittling. That voice had haunted me for years. Now it was silenced, replaced by the sound of pen on paper, by the image of his inheritance flowing through my hands. I decorated the mansion with everything he used to beg for: imported Italian marble, hand-carved oak furniture, chandeliers dripping with crystal. But every single piece was chosen for me, for my taste, for my new life. And oh, I reveled in it. I threw parties along the coast, inviting business magnates from New York, investors from Los Angeles, and politicians from Washington, D.C. They all shook my hand, calling me Mrs. Whitmore, treating me as the empress of the fortune Daniel had lost. Word spread quickly through America's circles of power. Daniel Whitmore had been stripped, humiliated, outsmarted by the very woman he had discarded. It was delicious to watch his reputation rot like fruit left in the sun. Of course, it didn't take long for Daniel to come crawling back. It was a Friday night when I saw him for the first time since the reading of the will. I had just returned from a charity gala in Miami Beach when the sound of pounding fists echoed through my front gates. Security called me, their voices laced with disgust. "It's him, ma'am," one of the guards said. "He's drunk." I walked to the security monitor, glass of champagne still in my hand, and there he was, Daniel, slumped against the gates, his expensive suit stained, his hair disheveled, his face twisted in rage. His voice slurred as he screamed, "You witch! That money is mine. You hear me? Mine." I leaned closer to the camera, letting him see me clearly, my face calm, composed, radiant in the glow of my new empire. I pressed the microphone button and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Not anymore." Then I turned to the guards. "Escort him off, like the beggar he's become." They didn't hesitate. 2 men in black suits approached him, lifting him like a sack of trash, and tossed him onto the curb. I watched through the cameras as he stumbled, cursing, his voice breaking into desperate sobs. I felt no pity, only triumph. But revenge is never satisfied with just one victory. I wanted more. I began cutting Daniel out of everything. His credit cards? Frozen. His access to accounts? Denied. The house he thought he would inherit in Chicago? Sold. The cars, the jewelry, the art, all liquidated, with the proceeds reinvested under my name. He had nothing left but his name, and even that I dragged through the mud. I made sure every powerful man and woman in Boston, Chicago, and Miami knew the truth. Daniel Whitmore was a penniless fool, living off scraps handed to him by the woman he once called useless. He tried calling me, of course. Begging at first, then threatening, then begging again. His voicemails grew more pathetic with each passing day. "Karen, please, just give me a little. I need something. You can't do this to me." Or, "You think you've won, but I'll find a way to take it all back. You'll regret this." I would listen, sip my wine, and delete them. His threats meant nothing. His pleas meant even less. The real power came in watching him unravel. I hired private investigators to keep tabs on him, and their reports made me laugh. Daniel reduced to crashing on couches in cheap motels, borrowing money from old acquaintances, pawning his watch, selling his car. The man who once dreamed of yachts and penthouses couldn't even pay for his own meals without begging. America had no place for men like him anymore, weak men stripped of resources, flailing in a sea of sharks. And yet, that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel me everywhere, to know that I was the hand that fed him and the fist that starved him. One afternoon, I mailed him a check. Just $50. Nothing more. In the memo line, I wrote, "Buy yourself some pride if you can find it." I imagined his face when he opened it, red with rage, twisted with shame, powerless to do anything but choke on the insult. That was worth more than any million in the bank. Still, the hunger inside me burned hotter. Revenge wasn't just about stripping him of wealth. It was about dominance, about proving to him and to myself that I had risen from the ashes of his betrayal into something greater. So I built an empire. I invested in properties up and down the East Coast, flipping mansions in New York, funding skyscrapers in Chicago, pouring millions into tech startups in Silicon Valley. Every dollar I spent was another nail in the coffin of his pride. I became what he could never be, a builder, a leader, a force to be reckoned with. And every headline, every magazine feature, every photograph of me shaking hands with senators or walking red carpets was another dagger in his chest. He had thought divorcing me would make me disappear. Instead, it made me unstoppable. And as I stood on the balcony of my Miami mansion one evening, the ocean breeze whipping through my hair, I raised a glass of champagne to the horizon and whispered, "Daniel, you wanted freedom. But all you've earned is chains. And I'll be the one tightening them." My story spread like wildfire through the wealthiest circles of America. From New York to Washington, D.C., from Los Angeles to Miami, whispers of Daniel's downfall trailed me like perfume. People at charity galas chuckled behind champagne glasses, hedge fund managers in Manhattan boardrooms traded jokes about him, and society women in Beverly Hills murmured in satisfaction that the once proud Whitmore heir had been stripped bare. He had riches in his name, yet not a single dollar he could spend without me. The irony was too exquisite to ignore. I reveled in it. The same man who once stood over me, calling me useless, now lived in the shadow of my power. He depended on me for every crumb, every morsel of dignity. And I enjoyed reminding him of that fact. Sometimes I would send him a check for $50, no more, with a neat note attached. "Buy yourself some pride if you can find it." I pictured his hands shaking as he opened the envelope, his face burning with rage and humiliation. Revenge wasn't just a moment, it was a ritual, and I intended to savor it for as long as possible. But money alone wasn't enough. This wasn't simply about stripping Daniel of wealth. This was about power. Real power. I took the fortune he had been too arrogant to control and spun it into an empire. I built companies from the ground up, invested millions in real estate across the country, funded startups in Silicon Valley, and became the sole owner of properties Daniel once bragged he would someday purchase. I wasn't just spending money, I was multiplying it, weaponizing it. America became my stage, and Daniel? He became the tragic clown, a cautionary tale of greed and stupidity. At one gala in New York, a senator's wife leaned close to me and whispered, "Is it true you're the one holding the Whitmore fortune hostage?" I smiled, sipping my champagne. "Not hostage," I replied. "Ownership." He was never man enough to wield it. The laughter that followed spread across the ballroom like wildfire. It wasn't just that Daniel had lost, it was that I had won. I had risen from the ashes of his betrayal, sharper and stronger, my heels grinding his pride into the floor with every step I took. Daniel couldn't stay silent, of course. Men like him never can. He showed up at my Miami mansion again, this time sober, his suit pressed, his face pale with desperation. Security wanted to remove him immediately, but I allowed him in. I wanted to see him break in front of me. He stood in my glass-walled living room, staring out at the infinity pool, the Atlantic Ocean stretching beyond it. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to cry. Then his voice cracked. "Karen, please. I made a mistake." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs, my glass of wine balanced in my hand. "You think so?" He swallowed hard. "I shouldn't have said what I said. I shouldn't have left. You're right, I was wrong. I need some of it back. Just a little. Enough to start over." I let the silence stretch, savoring it like fine wine. Then I laughed. Not softly, not kindly, but with sharp, mocking cruelty. "You wanted freedom, Daniel. You told me I was useless. You spat me out like I was nothing. And now? You stand here begging me like a dog for scraps. This prison of poverty you live in, it isn't mine. It's yours. You built it yourself." His face twisted with rage. "You bitch," he hissed. "You think this will last forever? One day you'll slip. One day, they'll see you for what you really are." I rose to my feet, heels clicking against the marble floor, every sound like the beat of a drum. I walked toward him slowly, deliberately, until I was close enough to see the sweat on his brow. My voice was low, sharp as a blade. No, Daniel. One day, they'll forget you ever existed. And I'll be the one who makes sure of it. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. He turned and stormed out, his shoulders shaking with impotent fury. I watched him leave, smiling to myself. That night, I issued my final strike. Using the money I controlled, I commissioned a full-page spread in the Wall Street Journal, a glossy profile of me, the woman behind the Whitmore empire. It detailed my rise, my investments, my vision for the future. And at the bottom, in sharp black print, was a single sentence: Daniel Whitmore, though listed as heir, plays no role in the operations of the estate. The article went viral. Within days, magazines and television shows across America were calling me the Ice Queen of Miami, the woman who had turned humiliation into power. Daniel, meanwhile, was reduced to a laughingstock. Photos surfaced of him stumbling out of cheap bars, of him pawning his possessions, of him trying and failing to secure loans. He couldn't escape the story. It followed him into every room, every whispered conversation, every headline. I had not only destroyed his fortune, I had destroyed his name. One last time, he tried to confront me. He cornered me at a charity event in Los Angeles, surrounded by cameras and flashing lights. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice trembling. "You can't keep this up," he shouted, his voice cracking as people began to stare. "You ruined me, Karen. You ruined my life." I turned to him, every camera capturing the moment. My smile was cold, perfect, lethal. "No, Daniel. You ruined your life. I just wrote the ending." The crowd gasped, then erupted into laughter and whispers. Daniel's face turned crimson, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He fled the event, humiliated, his last shred of dignity stripped away in front of the world. And me? I raised my glass high, the cameras flashing like fireworks. I had won. Completely. Daniel was nothing more than a broken man, a shadow of his former self. While I stood tall, the empire under my command, my name etched into the fabric of America's wealth and power. My revenge was not just complete, it was eternal. And as I walked away from that night, heels clicking, I never looked back.